Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we are taking a look at how creators build their worlds and their characters. We'll be taking our main look at the motivations and main relationship of Kafka Haibano, the main protagonist of Kaiju number 8. Most noticeably, we'll be looking at the classic trope of the childhood promise between Kafka and Mina, and the role it does and doesn't play in the story. But first, if you need a laugh, and who doesn't in these trying times, follow the link below to the video to check out Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, a book of human absurdity. Monty Python meets Star Trek in this collection of short stories. Now, if you have read any manga at all, you are aware of the prevalence of the trope of the childhood promise. Either the series starts with it, or you have a major flashback to our two little protagonists linking their pinkies and making some promise or the other. Now, this trope is most common in romance and battle manga, with the romantic couples promising to get married or to be her bride when they are old enough, or the battle brothers swearing to achieve some goal, usually along the lines of being the greatest whatchamacallit or promising to defeat the Dark Lord Matron. You get the idea. Now, let's all take a moment to step back and remember that ancient saying. Just because something is a trope does not make the idea inherently bad. This is not a bad trope by any means. It is in fact a wonderful way to establish a bond between two otherwise disparate characters. Those emotional bonds that we form in childhood, when we are still rather unformed, are often in real life stronger and more substantial than any friendship we form when we are older. This situation also allows for friendships between people who would otherwise never have been in the same social circle. Passions and interests that are now almost all-consuming passions were then only flickers of interest that did not compete with our friends' similar flickers of interest. Those interests could easily be shared when the passions would have actively repelled each other in their fully mature form. This way, you can justify a deep friendship between two people who might share very little in the way of interests as adults. The jock and the geek, the high-class princess and the common woodcutter's son. As I said, it is a useful trope or writing tool, but boy and howdy has it been overused. And like anything that gets overused, it is stale and cliché. They even reference this in Kaiju number 8. I believe what one of the guys in the bath said, that old cliché? It is often just used as a patch to make a friendship relationship work with no other explanation, forcing two vastly different people who share no chemistry together for the sake of the story. And it does this very well, which is why it is so overused. When the childhood promise is used as the motivation for the protagonist, it can often make the protagonist come off as a one-note or flat character, if it's written poorly. So, how does this all relate to Kaiju number 8? Because if you've been listening to my videos up till now, you can probably guess that I'm not going to claim that Kaiju number 8 is written poorly. Firstly, and most obviously, this is the bond between Kafka, Haibano, and Captain Mina. They made a famous Battle Brothers-style childhood promise on the ashes of their destroyed neighborhood to exterminate all kaiju. Interestingly, given their ages and the intensity of the motion, this could be a romantic promise as well, or it could fruit into a romantic promise, but despite the fact of him being the male lead and her being the female lead of the story, there is no hint that this is a romantic promise, that this is anything in fact but a Battle Brothers promise, which does kind of make it, I don't know if I'd say it makes it unique. There might be another story like this where the promise between the male and the female leads was strictly a Battle Brothers style promise, but it is fairly rare. And that promise runs like a thread below every chapter as a driving force for Kafka. But, and this is the important part, it is only a thread, not the entire raft and weave of the story, not the entire force driving the story forward. From the very first chapter, we can see that the promise alone, or rather the memory of the promise, was not enough to keep Kafka on the track of joining the Kaiju Defense Force. He clearly still had that promise in his mind when he was slouching around his apartment in boxers in his low estate. It was there when he was just one more slovenly, single civil servant who never made up his bed. The promise was a part of who he was, but it certainly wasn't all of who he was, and most importantly for the story, it wasn't enough to get him on track. It wasn't enough to drive the story forward. So, what did get him off his butt and back into the action? Well, it was the childhood promise. What, you say? Don't contradict yourself, you say. Ah, but I'm not contradicting myself. The childhood promise is a thread that winds all through this story. Therefore, you should expect to see it everywhere you look. It's not the driving force, but it is there. The childhood promise was there acting on Kafka when he made the decision to step back into the fray. But there were many more threads as well directing the story. There was Kafka's simple motivation to be a useful member of society. There was Kafka's natural response to the determination and drive that Reno brought with him. There was Kafka's simple determination to not fail at the task he had set for himself. There was all this and the childhood promise too. It was there, woven together, weaving through every single one of these motivations and holding them together. Look at it this way. If you take the childhood promise out of the story, you are to be sure missing something important, something critical to the emotional toll of the story. But you still have a pretty decent story. The creators are simply using the trope as one more ingredient in a complex recipe. They are not making it the whole dish. It's like the old story that our Sifu tells us every so often in Kung Fu class. He likes to stop the class in mid-class when we're all gasping for air and recovering, and he tells us about this disciple that goes to his master and asks how to achieve his goal. First, the master points to a flag on top of the mountain. That is your goal, the master says. Keep your eyes on it and climb the mountain as fast as you can. The disciple does as he says, and with predictable results. He starts running up the trail with his eyes fast on the flag, and utterly fails to see the tree root that trips him over, the cliff he falls off of, the lion he steps on, and at the end of many days, the disciple staggers back to the old master and hands him the flag. The disciple is battered, bloody, and exhausted. The master now says, "Ah, you achieved your goal, but this time do it again. But get a good look at the flag at the top of the mountain, then drop your eyes to the path in front of you. Set yourself a small goal. When you get to that goal, look back up at the flag and reorient yourself. Then find your next goal and get to that goal, look for the flag. Each time this will take you closer to the flag." The disciple sets off and following these new instructions. This time around he's back with the flag in a few hours without a scratch on him. Now, honestly, that disciple sounds like something of an idiot, and I suspect the master might have been trying to get rid of him, but that is beside the point. These stories follow these formulas for a reason. This famous pattern holds true for almost everything we have seen up in the series for now. When Kafka first transforms and battles his first kaiju, he isn't thinking about his childhood promise at all. At least we don't see him thinking that. The only thing driving him at that moment was his need to protect the innocent, that mother and child trapped in a building. There was someone in front of him who he could help. There was a clear, defined duty. All he saw was that duty in front of him, and the quiet courage that he had built up over a lifetime of making the right choices acted through him. During the first beat of the application arc, he isn't thinking about meaning or promise. He is driven by good, wholesome, competitive spirit. First he scraps with Shinamaya, and then he keeps his focus on the competitors directly in front of him. When he demands to stay in the competition, his focus is on Reno, not Mina. Mina didn't even cross his mind when he risked it all to save Shinamaya. He was just protecting the person in front of him. Even in the bathhouse scene, when he actively discusses his childhood promise, it isn't the core of the scene or even of the conversation they're having. The rest of the guys were perfectly willing to interact with him on the terms of who he was and of himself. The childhood promise wasn't really the reason he was there. This theme runs through the story again and again. Kafka grades himself based on these gradual achievements and on the approval of those he respects around him. His thoughts aren't Mina this or Mina that. Rather, it's Reno needs a good role model, and I don't want a vice captain to catch me burning the midnight oil again. Most notably is the first time the story focuses on Kafka feeling like he's truly a part of the team. After he's been formally promoted to Defense Force officer, and he's out on the roof basking in the glow and pride and accomplishment. When he was in the room with Mina, it was all about his relationship to Mina. But once he's out of there, it's not because Mina has complimented him or acknowledged him. It's because Vice Captain Hoshina has expressed a tiny bit of faith in his abilities. The first step that Kafka takes to achieving his goal of his childhood promise has almost nothing to do with meaning and everything to do with finding his place in the life he has chosen and knowing that he has reached that place through achieving reasonable goals. So, what do you think? Do you know of any childhood promise tropes that were done badly? Can you name any manga where you're like, oh man, this is just cheesy? That's his one and only defining driving point. Or have you ever seen any childhood promise tropes done as well as this one in Kaiju number 8? So please leave your links below. I'd love to hear your guys' comments, and it's also absolutely awesome when I get feedback from you guys from this, because I kind of see these videos as a conversation. Because you know what? There aren't that many of us who truly geek out over these random manga, especially when the manga is this young. So, check out the link below the video for an absurd look at the foibles of humanity. Humans are weird, I have the data. Monty Python meets Star Trek in this book of human absurdity. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.